Okay, in this video, we're going to be introduced to a concept called transformations. And it's under the general category of congruence. Remember what congruence means. It's when things are equal to one another in length and shape and size and that sort of thing. And this covers the Common Core State Standards in high school geometry of congruence and standard A3. Now, what's some of the vocabulary that you need to know about something called a transformation? Well, there's three types of transformations, okay? There's something called a reflection across a line, something called a rotation about a point, and then something called a translation, all right? So this is just a real basic introduction video. So let's start with what is a reflection. Okay, so let's talk about transformations, actually, before we do that. What is a transformation? A transformation is the movement of an object on some type of a plane, and it either retains its size or it gets larger, gets smaller. So that's what a transformation basically is. We're going to talk about something where the sizes remain the same, all right? So let's start with a reflection across a line first. So you're all familiar with the, let me just write this down here real quickly, reflection. Okay. You're all familiar with the XY axis, right? So let's assume we've got an XY axis going here. Okay. And now let's also assume that we have an object of a particular shape. So let's say we have, let's say this. So we have a right triangle, okay? And it has a particular length of the sides, hypotenuse, the long legs are a particular length, that sort of thing. And notice that I've written it in blue, okay? And I'm going to keep this color scheme going. Now, a reflection across a line is when I take this triangle, this right triangle, and it's like I lifted it and flipped it across this particular line. It could be any line, actually. I could flip it across this line. I could flip it across a diagonal line, but I'm going to flip it across the Y axis, okay? And I'm going to flip it like that. And it's going to move a certain distance, and I'm going to get the reflection of it, okay? Now notice that it retained the exact same dimensions. The hypotenuses are exactly the same length. So I'll do that. These are exactly the same length, and these are exactly. So it's like I took this right triangle and I just flipped it across and I reflected it across this line. Okay, so that's what a reflection is. Now let's talk about a rotation. Again, let's go ahead and draw our XY axis. Let me just set this up. Rotation. All right, so here's my XY axis again. Okay, and let's just choose that point. All right, and let me go ahead and again use blue. Oh, something I did forget to mention. I'm sorry. I should probably do this again. When I've taken an object like this right triangle and I've reflected it over here, this red part, once I've made the transformation, once I've reflected across the line, is called the image. And the name of the object before I actually translated it across, all right, before I reflected it across the line, is called the pre-image. All right, so that's also vocabulary that you should know. Now let's do the same thing with rotations, all right? Now what is a rotation about a point? So assume that, again, that I have this right triangle like this one. I'm going to make this one more of a isosceles, okay? So I'm going to say this one and this one are exactly the same length. And let's assume that I have a particular length here. And I'm going to try to draw this with two different colors because I want it to be slightly different. Now, a rotation about a point is when I basically it's like I pretended I hooked this particular shape to this little tether, and I just like moved it across here so that it's like this, okay? All right, and this being attached went along, and now I have, just assume that I again move that all the way across. All right, so what would happen? The hypotenuse would be there, okay? This part would be here, and this part would be there. So this and this just got moved like that, okay? That's called a rotation around a point, all right? And this particular distance has remained exactly the same. It's like I put it on the edge of this little teeny piece of stiff rope, and I just kind of moved it across there. And again, this is called the pre-image, and this is called the image. Now let's go ahead and move to the very, very last part to this introduction. That's called a translation. And this one's probably the easiest of the three to recognize. All right, so let me just move this paper off a little bit. So what is a translation? All right, so a translation is pretty straightforward. Again, let's just go ahead and take our XY axis. Now, you'll notice that most of these transformations are taking place in what's called the coordinate plane, and you'll remember that from geometry as just the XY axis, right? So again, let's take our pre-image, and let's move it this way. So here's our right triangle. And a translation is when you take this object and you just move it directly across, like in one direction, okay? So it's not reflected. There we go. It just basically retains exactly the same shape and size, but you just moved it directly this way, or maybe directly this way, or maybe directly down this way. And again, that's the image, pre-image, and that's the image. So what I'd like to do is give you a small test and see if you can figure this thing out. So here is a little test for you, all right? Here's my XY axis. And let's see if you can identify which of the three types of transformations this is. Is it a reflection? Is it a rotation? Or is it a translation? All right, so here's my drawing for you. I'm going to do this. All right, I'm going to draw a little parallelogram. Okay, I'm not going to put in any of the arrows, but I'm going to draw it, the pre-image and then the image. Okay. Can you identify what type of transformation this is? I'm going to give you a couple seconds. You can pause the video at this point. And if you said it was a reflection, you're absolutely correct. All right? Because it's like I took this image and then just flipped it around over to here. All right? And this would be a reflection. Okay, I hope this was helpful to you. I'm going to give you a couple other problems to work on. Thanks.